Hi friends! Welcome back for our fourth and final week talking about courage. We've talked about the courage that it takes to make mistakes. We've talked about the courage that it takes to take a leap, the courage that it takes to make a change. And today we're going to talk about the courage to trust. And today we're going to use a different book as our inspiration. Before I tell you about that book, I want to just say a little bit about why we're using art journals. We're all creating our art pieces in these journals this year. You know why? Because I love to journal. See these? This is just a sampling of my own collection of art journals. I have drawings in here, but I also have a lot of words in my journals. It's the place where I write down my thoughts and my feelings and my questions and things I'm learning and things I'm wondering about. I write down ideas for art projects and for lessons for you all. And so I am a big believer in journaling. Well, in one of my journals, I did something kind of courageous maybe. Instead of using a published book for our lesson today, we're going to use a book that I wrote in one of my journals. Now, what I'd love to do right now is hold it up for you and show it to you. But I have torn apart my studio trying to find this journal, and I can't find it anywhere. Fortunately, I have pictures of the pages, and so I'm going to show it to you and read it as we go. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the story. The story was written for a friend of mine who is extraordinarily courageous. I wrote it for a young woman who had a lot of hard things happen to her when she was little. She got hurt a lot. She had to move to lots and lots of different homes. She was afraid a lot, but she was also very, very, very brave. And so when she finally went to a new home, she didn't know who to trust. Could she trust the people in this new home? Could she trust this new environment? She just wasn't sure. And so I wrote a story for her, a story to help me understand her feelings and a story to help her family understand her feelings. And so as I read it, you might think about your own feelings. Have you ever had hard things happen to you? Have you ever had other people hurt your feelings? Have you ever had situations where you've been afraid? And have those things made it hard for you to trust other people? Well, if so, maybe you're like the main character in this story. Her name is Little Sparrow. Let's read about the courage that she developed that helped her to trust. So join me as I read my story to you. Little Sparrow squawked and flapped and pecked. She puffed out her feathers, trying to make herself look big. For a little sparrow, she could sure make quite a ruckus. This is how she started every day. Squawking, flapping, pecking. She had to practice. She had to be ready to protect herself from the hawks and owls and cats that lived nearby. It had always been like this. When she was just a young hatchling, she had to peck an alley cat straight on the nose to avoid being his lunch. That same night, she had to squawk and flap to fend off a hungry owl. She was one tough little bird. But she wasn't just tough. She was so clever that she always found the perfect hiding spot. She was so funny that she could even make the mourning doves chuckle. And oh, how she could sing! Little Sparrow could sing sweeter melodies than any other bird. But she dared not, for fear that the hawks and owls and cats might hear her. So she practiced squawking, flapping, and pecking instead. And that's how she stayed safe. All of the practicing in the world, however, couldn't prepare her for what happened when the big wind came. That morning, Little Sparrow awoke with a start as her tree began to sway. Thinking a cat was climbing the trunk, she readied her beak to start pecking. But when she looked down, there was no cat. No owls or hawks either. This time it was the wind. A really big wind. So big, in fact, that it blew her right out of her nest. It was a swirling, whirling, storming wind that scooped her up and spun her around and around. She squawked and flapped as it whisked her away, but nothing helped. She was scared, and there was nothing she could do but shut her eyes and let the wind blow. She finally landed with a thud on hard ground. Her beak was chipped by a flying branch and her feathers ruffled beyond repair, and one wing was most certainly broken. But as much as her body hurt, her heart hurt more. She lay there on the ground so scared and so alone. She looked around and nothing looked familiar. It seemed that the big wind had dropped her in a cage of sorts. There were wires everywhere, and a funny little cottage in the corner with miniature steps leading to the entrance. Where in the world had the big wind taken her? She was scared, so she did the only thing she knew to do. She squawked and flapped and pecked. Only her wings hurt so much that her squawking and flapping and pecking came out as one big cry. The ruckus she made woke the residents of the cage, and they all came out of the little cottage to see what was the matter. Mother Hen stepped forward first. She was huge and round and had a lumpy red flap hanging off her face. She reached out gently to smooth Little Sparrow's ruffled feathers. But Little Sparrow didn't recognize her kindness. Mother Hen's wing looked an awful lot like a hawk's wing to Little Sparrow, so she squawked so loudly that Mother Hen had to back away. Next, Papa Rooster came forward. He was bigger and had a stern look on his face. He leaned over Little Sparrow and tried to ask, "Who are you?" But all Little Sparrow heard was, "Who?" That sounded just like an owl to her, so she flapped her one good wing at him so forcefully that he too backed away. Finally, a mass of fluffy yellow chicks surrounded her. Their warmth and softness did not at all feel welcoming to Little Sparrow. Instead, they felt exactly like a cat's fur. Naturally, Little Sparrow was scared again, and she began to peck hard at the fuzzy little birds. The chicks scurried back to their parents. "Mother Hen, Papa Rooster, that mean bird just pecked us." Mother Hen gathered her chicks and whispered, "She's not mean. She's just hurt, scared, and confused. Give her time." And that's just what they did. The chickens went about their days as usual, while Little Sparrow sat in the corner and watched. She still had to look out for herself. At first, she arose even before Papa Rooster crowed to gather corn and seed and keep it safe in a hidden pile in the corner. But soon she realized that there was enough corn and seed for everyone, and that the chickens were happy to share. At first, she pecked at the wires surrounding the cage, feeling trapped by the limits of the coop. But soon, she realized that the cage actually kept out hawks and owls and cats. It was there to keep her safe. At first, Little Sparrow stood on the edge of the coop and mocked the little chicks while they played. But soon, she decided that kick the corn looked fun. And she was especially good at hide and beak. She could even get the whole coop crowing when she told "Why did the sparrow cross the road" jokes. Day by day, Little Sparrow began to feel more comfortable in her new home. At night, the chickens would march up the stairs to sleep in their little cottage. Little Sparrow reluctantly followed, just to keep warm. Every night, Mother Hen would invite Little Sparrow to nestle under her wing with the other chicks. but Little Sparrow usually refused, choosing instead to sleep in the corner by herself. One evening, however, Little Sparrow was startled by leaves rustling in the trees outside. She wanted to squawk, but this time she decided to whisper to her mother hen instead. "Is that a hawk, Mother Hen?" "No, Little Sparrow." Is that an owl, Mother Hen?" "No, Little Sparrow." Is that a cat, Mother Hen?" "No, Little Sparrow." Is that another big wind blowing through to whisk me away again?" "No, Little Sparrow. It is just the cool evening breeze. Come, nestle under the shadow of my wing. I will let nothing whisk you away. You are safe here with me." Little Sparrow considered Mother Hen's words. She listened again to the rustling leaves. Always before, when she was scared, she had to be tough. But this time, instead of tough, she decided to be brave. Little Sparrow did the bravest thing she had ever done. She chose to trust. Slowly and carefully, Little Sparrow nestled herself underneath the wing of Mother Hen. She felt warm and cozy. And something else. She felt safe. For the first time in her life, she felt really, truly safe. And as the breeze whistled outside of the coop, inside, if you listened very closely, you could hear soft, sweet notes as Little Sparrow began to sing. Thank you for letting me share my book with you. I don't know if you've ever felt like Little Sparrow, but maybe you know somebody who has. Somebody who doesn't really understand when you're trying to love them, or somebody who seems angry or afraid a lot. Maybe instead of leaving them alone or being mad at them, you could think about Little Sparrow and give them some time until they have the courage to trust. Well, today for our art project, we are going to do a little bit of two things in our journals. We are going to write some words or think some words while we are scribbling, and then we're going to turn them into an art piece. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Remember in the story how Little Sparrow was afraid of the owls? She was afraid of cats and hawks and owls. Well, I thought it would be fun to create an owl in our journal today. If you look closely, our little owl is 3D. We got a little beak going on here, but our owl's feathers are unique, aren't they? Our owl's feathers are made up of my own thoughts about fear and courage and trust. And so I'm going to invite you to join me as we create an owl out of our own thoughts today. All you need for this project is some markers. If you don't have markers, you can use crayons or colored pencils, anything that you have on hand. And you need a glue stick or some liquid glue, whichever one you have. So gather those supplies and let's create together. All right, the last thing that we drew in our journals together was from Where the Wild Things Are. So you can flip that page. You might have created a wild thing, so you might have that page as well. Go ahead and flip that and turn your journal this way. We are going to first create on this piece of paper. And what I want you to do is just dump out some markers, or if you have crayons or colored pencils, whatever you have, I want you to just have them ready for you. I want you to first grab the bottom piece of your journal, and about 2 or 3 fingers up from the bottom, I want you to just rip that across like that. So we have this extra piece right here. The first thing I want you to do there is we're setting aside this portion for our eyeballs, for our owl eyes, and for our beak. So we're going to take whatever color you want for your beak. I'm going to choose orange, and we're just going to color a corner orange. And we're just going to leave that like that for right now. And then I chose bright yellow eyes. I would choose a light color if you have it, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to color. Remember, on our markers we have the pointy tip right there, but we have the broad side of our marker. And if you want to color a large space, it's better to use the broad side of your marker. So go ahead, color the broad side of your marker. This does not have to be perfect. All we want here is to have a yellow piece of paper, essentially, but we're going to use our markers or crayons or colored pencils to create that. So this piece is going to be removed a little bit later, but we can just kind of save it there for right now. Now, I want you to use whatever other colors you have, and you can still use the orange and yellow in this portion of our time together. And this is where you get to kind of choose how you want to process this piece of art. If you like to write words, then I'm going to give you some opportunities to write words in markers. If you're not ready to write words, or if you just don't feel like it, when I tell you to do something, you're just going to think the words while you're doodling or scribbling in a color, okay? There's no right or wrong way to do this project. So the first thing that you want to do is pull out any color that you like, and we're going to think about Little Sparrow and how she was very afraid at the beginning of the story. So with your marker, and this is totally secret, nobody's going to be able to read this. This is all going to be ripped up later, so you don't have to worry about that at all. I want you to write down maybe some things that have been scary in your life, places where you felt unsafe or times you felt afraid. And so maybe you write those words. I'm going to write mine in cursive. One time I got stuck in an elevator in a power outage, and that was really scary. So sometimes I'm afraid of elevators. But maybe you don't want to write the words, and maybe you just want to think, I remember that one time I was scared and it kind of felt yucky or hard. And so I'm going to just scribble while I think about that. So just take a second and write down words that remind you of things that make you afraid, or scribble or doodle or draw pictures of things that might make you afraid. Just take about 30 seconds to do that. Okay. Now I want you to take a different color, and I want you to think of people who have helped you when you have felt afraid. So you remember in the story there was Mother Hen and Papa Rooster and the chicks, and how they all tried to help Little Sparrow. Well, I want you to think about those people. And as you think about them, you can write their names here. You can draw pictures of them, or you can just kind of doodle and scribble while you think about them. So let's do that for a minute. Does your paper look a little bit like a mess like mine does? That's good. Now I want you to think about times when you've had to be courageous, when you've had to trust somebody, or you've had to try something that was hard. And go ahead and scribble while you think about that, or write the words down as you think about that, or draw pictures while you think about that, and use a third color. Okay, so you should have one big mess on your paper. You have this little piece down here and a big mess out here. And I want you to take both of those pieces of paper and I want you to rip them out. Okay? The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make feathers for our furry little owl right here. And in order to do that, all we're gonna do is start to rip. Just go ahead and rip up what you wrote. And as you rip, sometimes it's kind of nice to think about what you wrote on that page. Think about the courage that it's taken in the past to trust other people. Maybe it's to trust somebody to hold your place in line. Or maybe to trust a grown-up with something that was hard that you were feeling. Maybe it was trust somebody to keep you safe. Maybe you had to trust a teammate to catch a ball that you were throwing. There's lots of ways that we have to trust other people. And go ahead and rip until you have lots and lots of little pieces. If you're having a hard time ripping, remember you pinch at the top and pull down. That's the best way to rip. Pinch and pull. This paper rips really nicely. You can decide if you want those little edges on your paper. If you don't like those, you can rip those right off. It doesn't really matter. Not a right or a wrong way to do this. Then if you want to, I colored the background of mine just a little bit. If you have a color that you didn't use with your markers, or if you have an extra crayon or something, you could go ahead and I'm gonna do some cross hatching like we talked about last week. Notice I don't feel like I have to cover the whole piece of paper, but I'm gonna cross hatch with my crayons just to get an interesting background. You could use lots of different colors here. You could use just one color. Remember, with cross hatching, you can go up and down, side by side, but the more layers that you put on, the darker it gets. So I'll do one last bit of cross hatching here. I went two diagonals, a horizontal, and a vertical. But look how quickly I covered that piece of paper just with some crayons. Now comes the fun part. Now we're going to go ahead and glue the feathers of our owl onto our piece of paper. And for this little owl, I just decided to make him a little fluffy oval. If it's helpful, you could draw an oval on your paper just to kind of remind you where to stick your pieces of paper, but you don't have to. That's really only if you want to. Then you're going to take your glue stick and you're going to put glue on the back of the feathers and stick them any which way. There is not a right way or a wrong way. You're just going to start sticking them on and completely cover your oval. I'm going to go ahead and stick mine on while you stick yours on. All right, you should have a crazy looking fluffy little owl right there. You can feel all that texture in those fluffy feathers, and if you have parts sticking up, that's totally fine. It'll feel even more like a fluffy owl. Now we had to add the eyes and the beak. You have two choices here. You can rip your circles out, or you can draw them and cut them out. If you have scissors, you can do that. I kind of like to just rip so that the whole thing is ripped. But if that feels hard to you, feel free to get a pair of scissors and draw your circles and cut them. Before I do my eyes though, I'm gonna just rip my beak out right here. And instead of ripping right on the orange line, I'm gonna rip just a little bit above it so that I have that extra flap. And just like we did when we made our Oopsosaurus Rex, I'm gonna make it a little 3D. I'm gonna fold it just like that. And then I'm gonna put glue on the back of the fold. And I'm gonna stick my beak right here in the middle so that it sticks up a little bit. You can kind of see it sticking up. And then I'm gonna rip 2 big circles. I'm gonna rip one like this, and slowly, you see how as I'm turning my paper and just ripping a little bit at a time? If you want to do that, you can rip a big owl eye, just like that. I want mine to be kind of the same size, so I'm gonna set this one on top of here, pinch it down, and kind of rip around the other side. Ripping is a little bit hard because you have to be patient and slow. So if you just want to cut that, then that's okay. But I'm gonna choose to rip mine just for fun. All right. So I have 2 big owl eyes, and I'm gonna stick them right there. Look at those. Those turned out really big. That's fun. I'm gonna put glue on the back of those. Glue it right on like that. I'm gonna glue back on this one. My owl's gonna give him some wonky little eyes. So he's got his beak and his big eyes. And then you can add just a few fun little details. So I'm gonna add with some black, I'm gonna add the iris part of the eyes. I'm gonna leave a little bit white, or a little bit of shiny spot right up there. I'm gonna add some feet on my owls just by going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you wanted to add a branch, you could, I used a brown one there. You could use whatever color you want. Maybe I want to make his feet orange. If you want to show off some of the fluffiness of your owl, you could take your marker and just kind of scribble, do a scribbly outline around the outside of your owl. If you wanted to add eyelashes to your owl, you could. If you wanted, you could do all sorts of things. If you wanted to add more colors on the body of your owl, let's say you've ended up with a lot of white, or maybe you wanted to fill it in with some different designs. This is your creation. You can make it however you want. So now we have a little owl to remind us that sometimes things feel scary, but we can have the courage to trust, especially when there are those around us who love us that we can trust to keep us safe. Did you make your owl? Well, I did this twice and mine turned out so differently, each one. But each time it was really good for me to think through the things that make me scared, but also to think specifically about the people who love me that I can trust. And so I hope as you did it that you thought about those people too, and that you would continue to be courageous, that you would have the courage to make mistakes, the courage to take a leap, the courage to change your mind, and the courage to trust. We're finished with courage after this lesson, and next month we're going to move on to gratitude, where we're going to spend our whole month talking about gratitude, thankfulness, and all of the things that we have to be thankful for. Well, I'm thankful for you and for the time that we get to spend together, drawing and creating and thinking together. I hope you have fun too. I love getting to draw together even when we're apart.